Ok, clase, vamos a empezar en la página 130. Abran el libro, por favor, a la página 130. We're going to take a look at all 3 grammar boxes in this lesson together because I'm going to be out tomorrow and I want you to be able to make progress. I want you to be able to do something meaningful tomorrow. I'm not one of those teachers that likes to leave.
You mean 130?
I'm sorry, you're right, it is page 130, I apologize.
Oh, wait,
That's what you said.
no, that's what you said. Are you sure that's the right one?
I think it's 140.
142.
Oh, thank you, it is page 142, I apologize.
Okay.
Thank you for holding me accountable. As I was saying, I'm going to be out tomorrow, and I want you to be able to make progress. I'm not one of those teachers that likes to, that will give you busy work. I want to give you stuff that's going to help you progress through the lesson. And so we're going to talk about all 3 grammar boxes today. You're going to take notes in class today, and then tomorrow you're going to try to apply that. Now, what I would like to ask you to do tomorrow while I'm out is to do the activities from your packet that are related to this lesson. So that means all of the vocab activities and all of the grammar activities in your exercise packet. So please don't go home tonight and do all of those exercises so that you can do whatever you want to do in class tomorrow. I'm going to ask the sub to check for that because I really want you to use this time to dedicate yourself to Spanish. If you have them already done, because you're that kind of student, as soon as you got the new vocab list, you started working on those exercises, then go ahead and you can do some text exercises, or you can work with the Quizlet vocab, or things like that. But please use your time for Spanish class tomorrow. So we're starting with the grammar box on page 142 that at the top says repaso, verbs with reflexive pronouns and direct objects. Now, this is a new notes document that I put together over the weekend so that I could be sure that I remembered to say everything that I wanted to say about these topics, so that you might not understand what I was thinking when I wrote these things. So be sure to ask me questions if there are specific things that don't make sense to you. So we know that so far you have learned that you can use reflexive object pronouns or reflexive verbs to indicate that somebody is doing the action to him or herself. And that's the primary use of reflexive verbs. Now, there are other uses, and we'll get into those either later this year or early next year as you continue your study of Spanish. But the primary use is to indicate that someone is doing something to him or herself. Now, it's interesting. We need this structure, this kind of verb, and this structure in this lesson because we're going to be talking about getting hurt. And primarily, when we get hurt, it's because we do something to ourselves. We're running and we fall. We're playing basketball and somebody jacks us in the eye or whatever with an elbow. They're doing it to us, but we're the ones who get hurt. So we need this kind of verb to be able to talk about our injuries. And since this lesson, this whole chapter is about learning how to talk about reactions, one of the things, and in the last lesson we talked about how our feelings about how a sporting event or a competition of some kind turned out. Now we're going to talk about getting hurt during those things. We need to be able to use the right kind of verbs and the right kind of grammar to do that. So on your notes, one use of reflexive pronouns is to refer back to the subject, and we use reflexive pronouns to talk about someone doing something to himself or herself. That's that first part of your notes. And I hope that in there you will write down some examples, especially examples from this lesson. We have some verbs on our vocabulary sheet that refer to things that we can do or things that happen to us. And those vocabulary items that we're specifically dealing with here are vocab items 2 through 7. Now, it wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of jot those verbs in that left-hand margin of your Cornell notes to remind you what verbs we're dealing with and then to write some examples about that use some of these verbs. For example, en el partido de básquetbol, José se lastimó. Or, en el partido de fútbol, dos jugadores se torcieron el tobillo. Both of those use verbs from our lesson that report what happened to someone while participating in that sport. Not all the verbs that we have are related to participating in a sport, but that certainly helps us tie together the things that we were talking about in the first lesson and tie it to the second lesson. All right, now it says, next on your note sheet, you can use a reflexive pronoun with a direct object. Now, let's remind ourselves what the direct object of a verb is. Turn to your partner, tell him or her, what's the direct object of a verb? What does it do? What's it doing in the sentence? All right, so who wants to tell me what a direct object does in a sentence? Whoa, nobody's brave. Yeah.
It receives the action.
It receives the action of the verb. In other words, it's having the action of the verb happen to it. Okay, it's having the action of the verb happen to it. So when we say two players twisted their ankle during the game, what's the direct object? Not the players. The players are the subject. What is it, John? The ankle, right? Twisted is the action. What got twisted? The ankles. Ankles are receiving that action or twisted, okay? So, or sprained. So, ankles in that sentence is the direct object. Now, because of the context that we're working in, that reflexive pronoun or that direct object is often a body part when we're talking about those verbs like torcerse, romperse, etc. Or it can also be something that you put on, like your uniform, makeup, a bandage, okay, something that you put on yourself when we're talking about this context. So, in your textbook, it gives you the example, el cocinero se cortó el dedo y se puso una curita. So the cook cut his finger and put on a bandage. He cut what? He cut his finger. Finger is the direct object of cut. And he put on what? He put on a bandage. Bandage is the direct object of put on. Okay? So, you can see that we have this reflexive verb, but then we also have a direct object. Now, we can replace those direct objects with direct object pronouns. You've been doing that for a long time. Okay? So let's remind ourselves, what are the 4 places in a sentence where a direct object pronoun can go? Do you have them all 4? Okay, awesome, awesome.
Do you want all of them or just one?
Give me just one.
Okay, before the conjugated.
Before the conjugated verb is number 1, that's the number 1 placement of a direct object pronoun. Abby?
Attached to the end of an infinitive.
Attached to the end of an infinitive. That's the second most common placement for a direct object pronoun. Dylan?
Attached to the verb and affirmative.
Attached to the end of an affirmative command. And we saw that today in the warm-up when we said, Bendete los tobillos, wrap up your ankles. Kelly?
Attached to the end of a present participle.
Attached to the end of a present participle. And you'll remember that the present participle is the ing form of a verb. So that's when we have that verb in the ando or yendo form. you can attach that direct object pronoun. Now, what complicates things for us, and by the way, I would love to have you write in some examples below that chart of 4 placements to illustrate each of those placements. You know, one where it's before the conjugated verb, one where it's attached to the infinitive, one where it comes attached to the end of an affirmative command, and one where it's attached at the end of a present participle. So now, that's all that has in your textbook right there about it. But we've learned previously that when we have more than one object pronoun in a sentence, we're down at the bottom of the page where it says ojo. Ojo is what they use for, hey, note, pay attention to this. Put your eye on this. Okay? In a sentence with 2 placement options, you can choose either option. But both pronouns have to be placed together. You can't split them up. So for example, in number 3 here in your textbook, where it shows you that it can be attached to the end of an affirmative command, lávate las manos y ponte una curita, then no te quites los zapatos, hace mucho frío. Don't take off your shoes, it's really cold. And somebody continues to take them off, and mom says, don't take them off. Right? The I know it's really bad English. The them, don't take them off. What's the them? The shoes. Masculine or feminine? Masculine. Singular or plural? Plural. What are we going to use to replace it? Los. Now, that has to go before the conjugated verb, right? What order do they go in? Remember that? We talked about it. We had that fun little saying. Maybe we didn't talk about it. Didn't we learn indirect before direct, reflexive first of all? Oh my goodness. You can use 2 of them together.
Really?
Right, really. You can use 2 of them together. But when you use 2 together, I thought you already knew this, so let's make sure we got it jotted down here. When we use 2 of them together, they have to go in a prescribed order. Now that prescribed order is indirect before direct, reflexive first of all, or the acronym RID. I just remember indirect before direct, reflexive first of all, because that's the way I learned it 100 years ago when I was young like you. So you will never have all 3. It'll always be a combination of 2. So if it's reflexive and direct, it goes reflexive direct. If it's indirect direct, indirect direct. If it's reflexive indirect, it's reflexive indirect. Okay, that spells the acronym RID, or we say the little saying. So now we have to practice the little saying. And you can't just say it, you got to say it and sway it. So when you start, go left first. I'm going to do that for all my band people because they know that you always start out with your left foot. So we're going to lean to the left first, right? We start. Well, some of you had it straight that you're supposed to lean. You start with your left foot, but some people still, that escapes them completely. And when they start off, they start on the right foot. We know people like that, don't we? We know people like that. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to sway to your left, which is my right. I've got to get this straight, okay? So it's indirect before direct, reflexive first of all. You ready? Here we go. You're going to say it and sway it. You ready? Indirect before direct, reflexive first of all. Now, not everybody was saying it, and not everybody was swaying it. So now we have to do it again. Are you ready? Here we go. Indirect before direct, reflexive first of all. Now, some of you are minimalists. I can see that you're going indirect before. That's not swaying. That's nodding. That's tipping. So we got to do it. Say it and sway it. Come on, be committed. Do this in a very committed way. Here we go. You want that way first. Ready? Indirect before direct, reflexive first of all. Now, Miguel, I know you came in late and you're trying to get caught up, but I want everybody to say it and sway it. So you need to stop what you're doing and you got to say it and sway it. You ready? Here we go. Indirect before direct reflects the first of all. All right, now you'll never forget that. That'll be in your head forever. Later on today, it's going to run through your head. And what's really exciting, what's really funny is that when you take the quiz, I'll see people going like this because they're trying to remember what order they go in. So it doesn't matter. I like to remember it both ways, but that's what's cool for you. All right. Now, on that first page, are there any questions about anything we wrote on that first page? Now, again, we haven't done a lot of examples. Tomorrow, you're going to be applying the information. So today, we're just trying to get some things down on paper. And I'm trying to add in some things that will help you. And then tomorrow, you're going to work with the exercises. So now we're going to turn over to page 144 and talk about the topic of past participles used as adjectives. Now I copied some things directly from the textbook so that you would have the definitions in your notes. Verbs have a form called the past participle, which can be used as an adjective. In this lesson, past participles are important because. Who would like to finish it for me? Kelly.
You can use it to describe a condition or an injury to a part of the body.
You can use it to describe a condition or an injury to a part of the body. That's why it's important in this lesson. That's why we're talking about it now. But in fact, you've been using past participles as adjectives for a very long time. Whenever you said estoy aburrido or estoy aburrida, I'm bored. You're sitting in some other class, clearly not Spanish class, but you're sitting in some other class, and you said, I'm bored. You said, estoy aburrido, or estoy aburrida. That's your condition that results from choosing to not be entertained by what's going on. Okay? I'm tired. Estoy cansado, estoy cansada. That's your condition after having done something that will tire you. Are you with me? And so we're getting here. All right. So that's what we're talking about here is the condition that someone or something is in as a result of action. So, if someone sprains his or her ankle, then his or her ankle is sprained. If someone's wrist swells, then the wrist is swollen. Swelled, yeah, right? Swollen. So the past participle is the ed or en form of a verb. And it describes the resultant condition after an action has happened. Okay? So, there are some, I left the room again for examples. Let's remember that to form the past participles, number one, the first thing you do is drop the infinitive ending. So drop the AR, ER, IR. That's number one. And the number two, you add ado to AR verbs, and you add edo to ER and IR verbs. Now don't be confused here. A minute ago, we were talking about the placement of object pronouns. And we said that they can be attached to the end of present participles. These are not present participles. These are past participles, and you cannot attach object pronouns to the ends of these. Secondly, in this lesson, we're using the past participle as an adjective. So it's not acting as the verb, so you wouldn't be able to attach the pronouns to the end anyway. But I want to caution you, because one of the things that I've seen in the past is that students tend to think, oh, yep, it's a participle. I'm going to attach these pronouns here. Well, it is a participle, but it's a past participle, and it's not the verb here. It's the adjective. Now, there are some important examples from this lesson. There are seven of them here that you want to put in this table. So in the left-hand column, I want you to write the infinitive. You can find those in the middle of the box on page 144. List their past participle, and then list their meaning. I'm going to be quiet for a minute or two so that you can fill in that table, and then we'll come back and talk about it just a little bit more. So, all right, so I assume that you have that table filled out, and then you probably, because you're such brilliant people, you went on and read the next thing, that there are several irregular past participles, and I've listed some there that you may or may not already know, but they aren't really necessary in this lesson. There are two that are important in this lesson, and those are included in the box there, romper and abrir. Their past participles don't follow the rules, so these are roto and abierto, and they mean broken and open. Now, what's the rule concerning agreement when past participles are used as adjectives? This is kind of a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because all adjectives have to agree in number and gender with the noun they modify. Yes? So this is kind of a no-brainer. Just because it's the past participle of a verb, don't let that fool you. It has to follow the same rules. They have to agree in number and gender with the nouns that they modify. And then just give an example or two there to remind you about what that means. What does that mean? What does it look like? All right? Then we have just one grammar box to cover, and that's verbs like caerse. And this, I will be honest with you, this is the grammar point in this lesson that students stumble with the most. So I want you to understand going in that you need to take a little more care with this one to make sure that you understand it. I know that you can master this. I know that you can do this. It's a matter of giving it enough attention to be able to understand it, number one, and number two, to master it. So let's take a look at this. All right. Verbs like caerse. Now, what does caerse mean? It's on our vocab list. To fall down. Okay, let's just take a little bird trail for a minute. In English, tell your partner what's the difference between to fall and to fall down. Go.
Keeps fall, fall down like stubble, like fall.
This is hard, isn't it? To think about what's the difference between fall and falling down. Okay, Abby.
Like if you fall, you can like fall off a chair, and then fall down and trip or something.
Oh, that's a really good theory, but that's not the way I see it. I mean, it could be true. Let's see if we get some more explanation.
I think if you fall down, it's like you're able to keep yourself from getting hurt. Like you're able to like protect yourself, but like fall, like could be fall from any height, so you could get really hurt.
Maybe. Okay. Josh?
So falling down is like you take a stumble, then falling is when you like fall off a cliff.
Oh. Okay. Well, you know what? I've been reflecting on this because when you ask somebody, what happened? I fell. They don't say I fell down. They might say I fell down, but they might just say I fell. Right? Well, can prices fall down?
Yeah.
No, prices cannot fall down. They can fall, but they can't fall down. What about temperatures?
No.
They can drop or fall, but they cannot fall down. Yeah, what about grades? That's a really good question. Grades can fall, yes, but they don't fall down. Now, falling down, this is interesting. Falling down implies crashing, right? There's an end to it. You're going to hit. All right? People and animals fall down. But objects typically fall. Now it's just an observation about the way we use our own language. So let's think about that when we're using this verb caerse. That was just a little word trail. It really doesn't have a lot to do with our lesson. It's just, okay, I'm a word nerd. And I love to think about things like this. It's like, how did that happen? How did we create a difference there? Caerse is really to fall down. Caer is to fall. So you talk about grades falling, now that you've mentioned it. Grades falling, temperatures falling, prices falling, reputation falling. Those are all caer. But caerse is to fall down, and it implies clumsiness. It implies an injury just by its very nature. All right, so the two rules concerning the conjugation of verbs like caer in the preterite tense. Now, your text does not phrase it as two rules. I separated it into two rules because I want you to remember these two separate concepts. One has to do with what happens to verbs like this in the third person, both singular and plural. Who would like to tell us what happens to verbs like caerse in the third person, singular and plural? Josh.
The I changes to Y.
The I of the ending changes to why. Now, another thing your textbook doesn't tell you is why that happens. Okay? Let's go back to the conditions, and I should have put this in your notes. What is the definition of verbs like caerse? Let's write that right next to the title over in our Cornell notes. This is something I missed. I'm glad I'm going through this with you. What's the definition, or what constitutes a verb like caerse according to the text? Nobody knows.
Oh, they have the stem ends in a vowel.
The stem ends in a vowel. So there's another condition. In order to be a verb like caerse that we're talking about for this
Reflexive.
point, doesn't have to be reflexive, John. Has to be an ER or an IR verb. So two conditions have to be met. Has to be an ER or IR verb, and its stem has to end in a vowel. All right. So then our first rule is the I changes to Y. If you don't change the I to Y, you have three vowels in a row, and you are sounding like you're yodeling. El se caiu. Ellos se caíram. I mean, you could be yodeling. You could be from Switzerland trying to speak Spanish. Okay? So it causes, in other words, and I'm making light of it, and I was kind of, exaggerating there, but the truth is it causes a pronunciation problem. That's the truth. All right? And so the second rule that we have to remember that doesn't involve the verbs in the third person singular or plural is John. In every other form, the I's have an accent mark. Now that's unusual for us in the preterite. Not all of them have accent marks, but in this case, for these verbs, that's going to be the truth. So what kind of verbs are not included in this rule? Actually, I didn't give you a long enough line. What? AR verbs and verbs whose stem does not end in a vowel. AR verbs, I should have given you more line to write. AR verbs are not included in this rule. And verbs whose stems do not end in a vowel are not included in this rule. So, what's the stem of a verb? Let's make sure we can pick apart this rule. We understand what it means. What's the stem of the verb? Tell your partner what the stem of a verb is in general. Lillian, what's a stem?
The letters before that, AR.
Very good. Everything before the AR, ER, or IR is the stem. Everything that isn't the ending. Everything before the AR, ER, or IR. I like the way that Lillian said it. That was awesome. Okay, so what does the term third person refer to? Tell your partner. So Alex, did Joey tell you?
Yeah,
You knew, but yeah, go ahead.
he, she, it, they, and you all.
He, she, it, you, formal, and they and y'all, formal. Okay, the singular and plural. That's the third person. He, she, it, you, formal is third person singular. And third person plural is they and you all, plural. So in Spanish, that's él, ella, usted, and ellos, ellas, ustedes. If you think about our conjugation tables, it's the third row, third person. Okay? So, when we add that accent mark, we're doing so in order to be sure that it's being pronounced as a separate syllable. We've talked about this before. Why do we want to be sure that it's being pronounced as a separate syllable? Turn to your partner and tell him or her. Now, I'll remind you, the reason we've talked about this before is because we didn't want diphthongs. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And why didn't we want a diphthong in the verbs that we've talked about before? Maggie, do you remember? Do you remember? No. Okay. Yolanda, do you remember?
Is it the thing where so like all the words that are conjugated sound the same?
That's part of it, but there's a greater reason. Abby,
You don't want like the sounds to blend.
we don't want the sounds to blend in this verb because,
It'll sound like another word.
not because it will sound like another word, Kelly,
It'll change the meaning.
it won't change the meaning because we need to know when the stem ends and the ending begins. We do this, we don't want it to form a diphthong, and we want to be sure that the ending is pronounced as a separate syllable so that we know where the stem ends and the ending begins. Because the stem carries the meaning and the ending tells you the time frame and the subject. So we need to have that division there. That's the same reason that we've done it before, added an accent mark to keep a weak vowel from blending with the strong vowel that is a part of the stem when the weak vowel is a part of the ending. Now, I gave you the verb caerse on your chart, and then in your textbook, they list other verbs that follow that same pattern. Okay? So I left you space to jot those down. Now, in tomorrow's class, I'm going to leave those packet activities for you. Once again, please don't go home and do them all, but you can, do whatever during class tomorrow. I want you to be industrious tomorrow. I want you to reflect well on my teaching tomorrow. In other words, I want the sub to be super proud of you because you're well prepared, you know what to do, and you are mature and responsible citizens who buckle right down, get to work, and don't waste their time. I know that's who you are. You show me that all the time, okay? And so I really want you to live up to that rep tomorrow when you come into class. Questions for me? Okay, thank you very much for your attention this morning and being gracious while I was running around like a chicken trying to get other things accomplished. Appreciate that.